I get asked this question a lot, and there really is no perfect answer. It all depends on how many superstars you're comfortable using, how many superstars you want to use, and how many superstars you can actually keep track of on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, depending on what kind of a show, what kind of a universe mode you're running. For me, I like to have a bigger roster size just because I like to have a lot of moving parts. You'll often see when I'm structuring my weekly shows, like right now in the build-up to Extreme Rules, there's a couple of matches or a couple of little storylines going on that aren't building into the big pay-per-view. They're just other storylines that are happening. That doesn't always work if you have, depending on how long you want your episodes to be, or how big your show is, or how often you make a show. It ultimately depends. Like, if you only have one show a week, you're not gonna be able to cram like 50, 80 superstars onto a roster. It's just not happening. You've got, like, if, for example, Delzinski made his SNME universe mode, and his roster was fairly small compared to me, where I try to use mostly everyone, at least most of the current day superstars who are on the game, and maybe a couple legends every now and then. But with Delzinski, he had a much smaller roster size because his show was once a week. He had 1, 2, possibly 3 matches in a show, maybe an extra segment here or there. So at most, he might have like four different slots, or maybe 5 at most, at least on a regular weekly show to throw people into. So with that limited space, he could only use so many superstars. He can't have everybody on the roster trying to have a match each week or have some sort of a segment, because you're not going to be able to fit everybody onto the card. It's all about knowing your limits. Murph's YT13 uses a smaller roster as well, even though his shows are bigger in terms of, he posts 2 a week, and his episodes are usually anywhere from like 40 minutes to an hour long. But even then, his universe mode is pretty straightforward. If somebody's not doing something, if somebody's not in a storyline, sometimes superstars will disappear. So rather than keeping them on the show as dead weight where they're not really doing anything, Murphs will just take them off the show for a while. For example, Chris Jericho in his series had disappeared for a while, but then he came back to, I think Chris Jericho had lost he had lost the match with Cesaro to determine who was going to be the team captain of Survivor Series. And then Chris Jericho disappeared for a little bit in the build-up to whatever the next event was. But then he came back, and now he's in a rivalry with Finn Balor. So rather than keeping Jericho around to not really do anything and lessen the value of that character, Murphs just picked him up and removed him from the weekly shows for a bit, just to kind of, get him out of everyone's mind so that he could come back and have a bigger impact. With someone like me, I usually like to have a lot of storylines going on because I'm very, very interested in the storytelling process. I want to write my own story at some point. I have a whole other channel dedicated to analysis videos where I talk about writing, and I write all those scripts. I talk about those sort of production details because I'm very interested in that type of thing. So I want to have a bigger roster size. Part of that's also because I like to include as many people as I can. I had this problem for a while where I would get attached to like every WWE superstar on the roster, and that really hasn't changed. It's just the fact that now I don't really watch as much WWE. I haven't even really been keeping up on NXT anymore this year. But I tend to I tend to see potential in these guys. Like somebody like Zack Ryder in my series. He could just be a jobber. I could just write him off and not really use him, or just keep him around as an average jobber. But even then, I still tried to give him like some sort of credibility. Like when the Hype Bros fought the Outcasts at the Slammy Awards, the Hype Bros, they defeated the Outcasts there. When I could have just had the Outcasts win the match and just, that would have been the end of the Hype Bros as a credible tag team. I don't know, I tend to see potential in most superstars, or whether that be their raw potential or just missed potential that the WWE, failed to capitalize on. Like, again, with somebody like Zack Ryder, where he doesn't really do much anymore. For a while, he wasn't doing anything, but I saw the potential appeal in Zack Ryder. I saw that, with the proper booking, this guy could be something. And that's I guess a bit of a poor example, because I ultimately knew that like Zack Ryder you know, you have to set a cap as to where your main event's going to be. Like, not everybody can be in the main event, so you have to figure out where things are going to be. So if you have, you know, perhaps I don't need Zack Ryder on the roster, but I'd like to utilize superstars in whatever way that I can. It's also why people will ask me, where's Bobby Roode? Where's, you know, Eric Young? Where's Roderick Strong? You know, where's all these new superstars? Why don't I use these newer superstars? That's because my roster is already full with all of the guys who are on the roster, and just continuously adding new people into the mix, you know, it might spice things up, it might make things exciting at first, but if you can't keep track of everybody, it's ultimately just pointless. So I'm not gonna bring in a guy like Bobby Roode when I have a guy like, you know, I have someone like Curtis Axel right now. If I just brought in the entire Cruiserweight division right now, if I just brought in all these new superstars from NXT, how exactly, like, you know, how exactly would I be able to run with like the Outcast storyline, for example? If I have all these other superstars taking up space on the card, what am I gonna do with these lower tier guys, these other guys who I'm trying to build up? There's no room for them. And, you know, the solution to this could be just to expand your show. You could just make a weekly, like, 2-hour show and just, you know, include as many people as you can. If you have, you know, the writing chops, if you have the confidence in your abilities to do that, then I'd say go for it. If you're just starting out, it might be smarter to, you know, stick to a smaller roster size and just focus on a few key storylines. Again, people ask me all the time, you know, are you going to bring in NXT to your universe mode? When are you going to start making NXT episodes? And that just isn't going to happen. I don't have any plans to bring in NXT ever into the series because I've already got Raw, SmackDown, and Main Event. I'm planning on dropping Main Event soon, but that's less related to the channel. But I'm going to be expanding Raw and SmackDown to kind of make up for that. By doing so, though, it's possible that I might have to shrink my roster down a little bit because, like I said, I have a lot of background elements that I try to keep going even if they're not immediately in service to the next pay-per-view. So, like, with WrestleMania, we had all these matches building up to it. That was a massive card. But even then, there's still some stuff going on in the background that didn't build into a WrestleMania match. For example, you had the rivalry between Emma, Charlotte, and later Becky Lynch and Dana Brooke. I threw together this tag team matchup on Main Event, and it didn't build to a WrestleMania storyline, but it had been building in the background for a little while. It was it was a rivalry. They had Charlotte and Emma had a match at Roadblock, so it wasn't exactly leading up to WrestleMania, but immediately following WrestleMania, I was able to jump straight into this #1 Contenders series of matches, including Charlotte, Becky Lynch, Emma, and Natalya, because I was able to do that because I had this rivalry going on in the previous month. So it's not like I'm just pulling these people out of nowhere, because I've never been a fan of that. Like, when you just grab a superstar off the street and just, you know, give him a title shot, or just suddenly throw him into a match with this guy and expect me to be invested, expect me to care, that doesn't really work with me. Like, maybe that's how independent shows work, because they're less independent shows. I can't really describe them because I don't watch a lot of independent shows, but it's not to say that they don't have their own storylines, but it's a lot easier for them to draw people in with, you know, a specific name. You know, that doesn't really appeal to me. Like, you know, somebody could bring a broken Matt Hardy to a Ring of Honor show or whatever, but that I'm not really going to be invested, because I tend to value the storylines more so than the actual wrestling. So that's why, you know, when somebody just shows up for a one-off event and you expect me to take them seriously, it's a bit more difficult for me. I know NXT did that with Jushin Thunder Liger, and the problem there was that I didn't know really who Jushin Thunder Liger was. His match with Tyler Breeze was great, but he just kind of showed up, defeated Tyler Breeze, and never showed up again. And I'm sure, you know, the whole point was that, oh, Jushin Thunder Liger competed in a WWE ring. He competed in a WWE match. And fans of Jushin Thunder Liger would have loved that match. But for me personally, it's not something that I don't really remember what happened in that match. And that's because I haven't watched it since I watched that TakeOver event live. I could say the same thing for a match like Sami Zayn versus Shinsuke Nakamura. I haven't watched that in probably a year, but I still can remember pretty clearly moments from that match. yeah, Shinsuke Nakamura was a new superstar on the roster at the time, but his match with Sami Zayn, it had enough, also the fact that Shinsuke Nakamura, that was his NXT debut, and he continued to compete, so it had more to build off of with that. It was also, I guess, just an act of how that match was structured, but I already talked about that in my how to book matches and match cards video, so if you haven't already seen that, check that out. I guess I'm getting on a bit of a tangent, so I'm gonna wrap this video up here. There is no perfect roster size. Personally, I think you should start small, and as you gain more experience with booking storylines and booking characters, that's when I would start to expand your roster little by little. For me, I mean, you could try to take my approach. I won't say that your universe mode is gonna be great if you take my approach, because when I started, I always had a big roster. That's just what I wanted to do, but I couldn't, go back and watch a couple of my, it's tough for me to recommend watching my WWE 13 stuff because it's terrible, but if you want to go back and learn what not to do, just find a couple episodes of that within like a given month. Don't jump around from place to place, but just go back and look at a couple of those episodes, and the storylines are all over the place. Superstars kind of come and go. That's why I think like you could do that, because doing that gave me more experience with figuring out how to keep track of all of these superstars, how to utilize them all effectively. But if you're just starting out, if you want to have, I guess, a better show from the start, I think it would be smarter to start with a small roster and then just slowly expand from there, because that's going to give you experience with focusing on storylines. You're not going to be dividing up your attention between too many different things, and by improving your abilities in the smaller number of storylines, you are eventually going to get better, and you'll be able to multitask with your storylines better. You can have more storylines that you can manage, and obviously you can manage more superstars at that point, and it just sort of continues growing from there. It is possible that you can expand too far. Like, for example, with me having 2 or 3 shows right now, if I continued to make my roster any bigger, I would eventually overstep my comfortable reach of what I consider to be good booking, and it would start to spiral out of control, which is why I'm not making an NXT show on a weekly basis, which is why I'm not making NXT at all, and why I have no interest in it, because I'm aware of my limits, and I'm aware of what to avoid if I want to keep my show at the current quality that it's at right now. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it had some insight that was valuable to you. If you want to see more videos like this, this one is a bit more unscripted, but usually I have my Universe Mode 101 series. Those videos are scripted. I have another one coming up about how to book characters and storylines more specifically. This video just kind of this idea just sort of popped into my head because I got a comment about it on one of my latest Universe Mode episodes. So I figured I would expand on it while I had the idea fresh in my mind. That other video about characters and storylines, it's gonna be much more in-depth, so I would definitely stick around for that. Until then, I've got a video about commentary, how to book matches and match cards, and you could also study my Behind the Universe series if you want to see less of a tutorial video and more of just me analyzing my old work and pointing out the mistakes in it. Could probably learn some stuff there. It's not exactly a tutorial, but does have some helpful information there. Thank you for joining me, and until next time, keep on YouTubing.